Are you looking for the perfect holiday gift for that special someone in your life who likes to shoot suppressed? Consider getting them a bouquet of gas-busting charging handles.
That's a lot of charging handles. Thanks, bro.
Happy anniversary. I have a bunch of charging handles here from different companies that all claim to mitigate the gas-to-the-face effect when shooting suppressed. We're going to take a close-up look at these things and examine the design philosophies that these different companies have gone with to try to reduce or redirect the amount of gas that blows back into your face when you're shooting with a can on. This lovely arrangement of charging handles was sent to me by the fine folks over at arftac.com so I could compare them and do this video. So before we talk about the specifics of these charging handles themselves, we got to talk about where the gas is coming from when you're shooting a suppressed AR, specifically a direct impingement one. So gas is tapped off of the barrel, goes back down the gas tube and into the bolt carrier group, which moves to the rear. Pretty basic. We're not going to get into the weeds about internal pistons or why direct impingement isn't technically direct impingement, because I promise you nobody cares. But the bottom line is that gas is coming back into the upper receiver to drive the bolt carrier group to the rear. The gas tube sticks a little bit into the upper receiver and nestles inside the gas key of the bolt carrier group when, you know, the gun is all locked up and ready to fire. So the first bit of gas that comes in just starts to push the bolt carrier to the rear, unlocks it, and allows it to travel rearwards. The important thing is that if your gun is over-gassed, such as when you put a suppressor on it, there's going to be more gas than is really needed to drive the action. So there's a possibility that even after the bolt carrier group starts moving to the rear, there's still extra gas coming in there. Or there was just way too much gas to begin with in the first place, and so now you've got a whole bunch of extra gas. And it's got to go somewhere. The question really is, where does that gas go? Obviously, a lot of it comes out the ejection port. But since it's being directed high pressure back into the receiver, some of it will sneak out the gaps. On a gun like this one that has been shot a whole lot suppressed, you can see that there's salty lines on the receiver gaps. That's where gas and oil and stuff is leaking out the seams between the two receivers. But also you get a lot of it out the port for the charging handle. The real question is, where at the charging handle does the gas leak out? Because the charging handle nestles over the top of the gas tube. So the gas is coming out inside the body of the charging handle, not technically on top or around the sides, although certainly the system is not very well sealed, so the gas can leak all over the place inside the system. But that's really going to be the big difference when we take a look at these different charging handles. A lot of them have bigger shelves up here to try to reduce the gas that leaks out the top. Some of them have shelves or other systems on the bottom that attempt to reduce the gas coming out the bottom of the charging handle slot. As far as the effectiveness of these different charging handles go, we're going to talk about that at the very end because it's probably the least important part of this video. You'll see why when we get there. The main reasons why you want to reduce the gas to the face when shooting suppressed is for shooter comfort and because all those gases coming back into your face are probably carcinogenic, which is not great for your health long term. Once you start shooting with a suppressor, you're really not going to want to shoot without a suppressor. It makes guns significantly more pleasant to shoot, with the exception of that gas to the face effect, which can sting your eyes and get in your lungs and give you cancer and kill you. So other than that, you're probably going to just want to shoot suppressed as much as possible, and that means you're going to probably get sick of that gas to the face effect pretty quickly. The standard mil-spec charging handle has no specific design elements that really mitigate gas seepage around the back of the receiver, because I think the adoption of the M16 and the mil-spec style charging handle predates the widespread adoption of suppressors. So really nothing going on there. There is a very little shelf at the back that perhaps can deflect a little bit of gas that's coming out the back end. To what extent? Probably not very much. And that's basically all that's going on there. The first of the improved aftermarket charging handles that we're taking a look at is the venerable Radian Raptor SD. This is one of those charging handles that probably does the most to attempt to mitigate gas to the face. This is specifically sold as a suppressor optimized charging handle, and it has a very good reputation on the market for what I think is a pretty good reason. The Raptor SD has angled cuts in the front half of the charging handle and little holes drilled through the body of the charging handle at the base of those cuts. The back end looks identical to a regular Radian Raptor, at least to my eye, and I don't believe either of them have an enlarged shelf at the back. It looks like it's the same height as a mil-spec. Up next is the Geissele ACH, the Airborne charging handle, not to be confused with the surplus ACH helmet. The Geissele has an enlarged shelf at the back for deflecting gas, but otherwise pretty much standard mil-spec, nothing weird on the shaft of the charging handle, and nothing weird on the bottom here. Still just the same approximate geometry to a mil spec. The issue I think that I've got with the Geissele, and I've heard this from other people before, is that the latches, this is ambidextrous, but the latches tilt a lot more than you might expect from other charging handles, and that leads to you kind of pulling them at an angle. So this is not my favorite charging handle, and also it doesn't seem to do a whole heck of a lot to mitigate gas to the face, at least in our informal test. Up next is the Aero Breach. This is one of my favorite charging handles just because it's affordable and it does a pretty good job with defeating gas. This has a much larger shelf at the back end for deflecting gas, and it also has a similar version of the cuts that the Radian Raptor has. However, these go in the opposite direction, and they're just on the sides of the charging handle. There's no holes drilled through. So Radian Raptor SD has angled cuts like this with holes drilled in the bottom of the cuts. This just has these little angled cuts here. They almost look like sand cuts or something, like they're supposed to, you know, flush grime out of the receiver. So these may not really have much to do with the gas at all. You know, I might assume that if there was gas coming around the body of the charging handle, that an angled cut like this, like the Radian Raptor SD has, would be better. So those might not have anything to do with the gas, but the larger shelf seems to do a little bit of work, and these have nice ambidextrous latches as well. You can also get these in different sizes. I think this is the medium, which is probably my favorite size. The larger one is a little bit on the large side. Up next is the PRI Gas Buster. I think this is the M84, but there have been a whole bunch of different versions of the PRI Gas Buster over the years with different latch geometry, but I think they all have the same idea when it comes to gas deflection and redirection. This is a really beefy charging handle. It has big wings on it. It also has a very tall and very deeply scalloped shelf at the back to redirect gas, and it has a channel that seems to direct gas out the top to the right side. And same thing on the bottom. There's a little scalloped channel that seems to redirect gas out the right side on the bottom. So in theory, if you're a right-handed shooter, that should be good for you. Gas should be shooting out the right side of the gun. But it also has these extremely tall wings on the bottom of the latches, which probably also help redirect some gas in some ways, if that is in fact where the gas is coming out. Theoretically, gas could be coming out the top or the bottom of the charging handle slot. We really don't know. This charging handle is not really my favorite. It does a pretty decent job of redirecting gas, but it's also really big and uncomfortable to use, and yeah, just odd. I'm not a big fan of this one. Up next is the Strike Industries T-Bone. This is kind of a continuation of their latchless series of charging handles. Strike Industries has been trying to figure out ways to avoid having roll pins and latches and stuff in their charging handles. The old latchless one had these little like spring-loaded tabs that pushed against the inside of the receiver to keep it in place. This has a plastic little like locking tab thing. So this doesn't articulate in any way, but the plastic is flexible enough that you can still pull it back out, and yet the pressures of firing will not move the charging handle, at least on a 5.56. Kind of a weird charging handle. The whole point behind this one is that you can insert plugs into the wings of the charging handle to theoretically redirect the gas. So there's these little ports at the bottom of the charging handle at the back that go out either side, essentially redirecting the gas to either side of the gun, but then you can fill one of the vent holes with a little tiny screw, or both, or neither. So I have the left side screw in, which means it should be shooting gas out the right side of the charging handle. Does it work? Doesn't seem to. At least it's not all that noticeable compared to some charging handle designs. So, interesting charging handle. Not bad. Not great. And the last one is the newest design and the most radical. This is the silencerco GDCH, gas defeating charging handle. This thing has an extremely tall shelf at the back that basically sits flush with the top of the receiver, so completely engulfs the upper gap of the charging handle and the receiver fit. This one also has a rubber gasket, a U-shaped gasket on the bottom that's supposed to seal the gap at the bottom of the charging handle and the receiver. According to silencerco, that's where most of the gas is actually coming out, at least in their tests. They, you know, have some high-speed photography or whatever that show gas leaking out the bottom of the charging handle. That makes sense to me, at least on paper, because the majority of the gas coming through the gas tube is going to end up beneath the charging handle, and I'm sure plenty of it's going to leak around the other ways, but that seems to be the most direct path for high-pressure gas to be going, is underneath the charging handle and out the back of the receiver that way. So does it work? Yes, it does seem to do a really good job of mitigating the gas to the face. It's got this big shelf up here, and the rubber gasket at the bottom does seem to seal pretty well. However, there are a couple of issues with this. This is my second GDCH. The first one that I had, the pins would walk out in under 10 rounds, which I noticed because they sit so high to begin with that once the pins started walking out, I could no longer fold my M-Bus sight back down because the pins were sticking out too far. So I sent back my original charging handle to Silencerco, and they replaced it with this one, which seems like it might be a slightly newer generation. It had what looked like a sort of different color of anodizing as well. This one still seems to have the same issues. The roll pins like to walk out at extremely low round counts. They've never completely walked out, making the charging handle inoperable or, you know, flying off or anything, but they do slowly creep up over time, and you squish them back in, and I'm not really convinced that this is going to be a very good long-term solution. Also, the other issue that seems to happen with this is that the rubber gasket on the back seems to get easily pulled out of the charging handle and then kind of just gum up the works. I think the issue really there is that anytime that you operate the charging handle, you let it slam back home and it's dragging against metal parts of the receiver or the castle nut or something, and because the O-ring thing, or U-ring, because it's not completely circular, right? It kind of gets dragged out the back of the charging handle and doesn't really seem to stay in for very long. So this just doesn't seem like a very good hard use charging handle, but it does seem to do a really good job of cutting down on the gas. So maybe if you're just kind of, you know, doing casual shooting and you're willing to baby this thing, you might appreciate that gas defeating effect. Or, you know, maybe some of these are better than others. I'm not really sure. My sample size of 2 GDCHs has been a little disappointing. Just in terms of raw gas performance, see, there it is. There's all the particulate in the air. It's it just builds up, you know, after 5 to 10 rounds. It really doesn't matter what charging handle you're running anymore. You just start getting gassed out. So that definitely seems to work better and longer than most other charging handles. The only problem, of course, is the fucking O-ring. The gun we used for our gas to the face testing protocol is a 12.5 Faxon mid-length with the Gemtech Trek 2 installed, because that is a very high back pressure old school style of suppressor. There's nothing else going on with this gun. It has a standard carbine spring, an H1 buffer, and a mil-spec Sol GW bolt carrier group. This is kind of a weird gun, and with an old suppressor like the Gemtech Trek 2, it is a very high back pressure setup. This is a fixed front sight based gun, so there's not a whole lot we can do to control the amount of gas going back into the system. If we were setting up a dedicated suppressed gun, we could make much smarter parts choices, and we wouldn't be so overgassed in the first place. We could have built out a gun with an adjustable gas block, or we could swap the gas tube out for one of Black River Tactical's reduced port size Easy Tune gas tubes. We could also be using a piston gun that dumps more of the gas under the handguard instead of back into the action, or we could get a lot of improvement from using a more modern style of low back pressure can. The observations from this test are very subjective. I had a buddy of mine shoot this for the slow motion footage because I already have plenty of cancer going on in my life, but I've also shot with all of these charging handles on 2 different guns, and I tended to agree with all of my buddy's assessments.
Better.
Without some sort of lab conditions and the ability to measure parts per billion of gas in the air, there's really no way to do this that isn't going to be completely subjective. For all these gassing tests, we shot a short string of fairly dirty 223 brass case ammunition. If you shoot too few rounds, then you don't get gas to the face with any charging handle. If you shoot too many rounds in a string, then you get gas to the face with every charging handle. So there's a sweet spot of about 5 to 10 rounds where you actually seem to see a little bit of effect from certain charging handles and not others. Again, it's an extremely subjective test, and the results from all of these charging handles tend to be pretty underwhelming. There's only so much a charging handle can do. So which of these charging handles work the best, and which one do I recommend? I recommend the Aero Precision Breach and the Radian Raptor SD. Both of those seem to do a pretty good job of mitigating gas, and they also work really well just as regular charging handles. The other ones either have, you know, functional problems or just don't seem to do much in terms of gas mitigation. That being said, however, charging handles are not where you should be focusing on when trying to reduce gas to the face. If you properly tune the gun for shooting suppressed, make it a little more mild, reduce the amount of gas that's going back into the gun in the first place, that's going to give you a lot more mileage than some vent holes or a weird shelf at the back of the receiver or an O-ring that falls out in under 50 rounds, right? And the main reason for that is that most of the gas when you're shooting suppressed is going out the ejection port, not the charging handle gap. And the ejection port is only a couple of inches away from your face. So if you have a really good gas defeating charging handle, it will seem to reduce the effect of gas from maybe the first like 1 to 3 rounds. But if you shoot longer strings or sustained fire, then a lot of gas is going to build up around the gun and your face is there. You're going to breathe all of it in anyway. There's really not a lot you can do about that on a DI gun. Piston guns maybe a little bit better, but that's kind of where I come away from it. If you want a good gas busting charging handle that'll make, low round counts more pleasant, Aero Precision Breech, Radian Raptor SD, but definitely focus on tuning the gun to be a little less gassy overall. And understand that once you shot 10 rounds in a row, the charging handle is no longer providing much of an effect at all. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you to ARFTAC for collaborating on this video, sending out these charging handles so I didn't have to spend 600 of my own US dollars on gas defeating snake oil. Please check them out. I think you'll like their website. It's very much a curated set of only high quality Glock and AR accessories and parts. Like, they don't have a whole bunch of trash filling up their website. Pretty small selection for now, but check them out. I think they will continue to grow, and they like dogs. And if you like dogs, tell them that you like dogs, and they will send your dog some treats along with your package, which is pretty badass. So stay tuned. See you guys next time.